like I said, I wasn't playing to a particularly discerning audience at home, and most of the local DJs were just into playing like this crowd pleaser, crowd pleaser, crowd pleaser music, and we didn't have any kind of venues, but we set up a sort of night at this arts centre, which was like the closest thing we had to the sort of venue in about 90, I guess about 93, 94, which me and a friend called Pete ran, and it started becoming really quite good. We'd get quite a few people down there, and some people had played down. There was a couple of guys from a local town who used to do like live sets, kind of similar to Orbital, who were called Active Loop Zone, and they get like the Akai's up on stage, and it was I guess taking its lead from kind of Club Dog, because a lot of the people who were involved with it were from that Travellers community.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a whole other story that I was sort of involved a bit in the 80s when I used to DJ for Rough and Ready. But there was that whole, that the Traveller squat crew, like you said, the Club Dog come out. That was quite an early part of that scene. And, obviously that's where stuff like, if you like, Spiral Tribe and all them sort of people come out of. There was that scene in the 80s, which was, the squat festival crew, which goes back to obviously the 70s and the 80s, and the Travellers, like the free party, the free festival.
They'd taken it over. I mean, do you remember the Urban Free Festivals in Deptford?
I remember them very well.
Yeah, Bedlam and Spirals be down there and stuff in the park at 2 PM on a Saturday in Deptford, and it'd just be a massive party.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've actually got loads of photos that Stacey dug out of of us at the free festival in Deptford, and that's classic. And I found the programs actually the other day. I've still got some of the programs from there, and I'd actually remember like seeing Orbital there, like in this tiny little tent at that, just as the sun's going down, and they're wearing their little glasses with the torches on, and just as they're sort of coming out, really, they weren't massive then, but it was definitely that there was that was part of that crossover sort of scene. I was going to this venue up in Peckham, the Dole House, which was where they all squatted, the old Dole House in Peckham, which the building's still there next to the middle.
Yeah. There's actually footage of a Spirals party of that at that venue on YouTube.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's in the morning. And there's a few people shambling around to like seriously hardcore music. It's a very funny video.
It's not the one that's it, because there is one at Lewisham Library.
Oh, it's Lewisham. You're right.
No, the Lewisham Library one is incredible. I'll have to try and find that. Put a link in the show notes if that's still up there. But yeah, like it's Lewisham. Like I think it's Charlie Hall's plan, because I posted that a few years ago. My friend Lorraine, she was going out with Charlie Hall, and she was like, "Oh yeah, that's Charlie's playing." And again, it was Lewisham Library. There's some classic, like let's just say, what is it? It's about midday on Sunday, and like people busting some shapes in a half empty Lewisham Library. Yeah,
it's the shape of things to come, really, for the next 10 years. In terms of like, maybe a lot of the raves. So yeah, I mean, it was an interesting time in terms of like buying records and playing them, because I was just like still really finding my feet, and there was like almost too much interesting music and cool music coming out, because I mean I never sort of didn't like drum and bass and breaks and stuff. It's just that it becomes such a singular split off scene that to concentrate on buying stuff in one genre to play, it was really difficult. But around about this, a year or so after I got my decks, like my Will, who's been mentioned before, good friend of mine, bought some decks as well, and he was very much into like the emerging jungle sound. He was very really into Bookham and Groove Rider and whatnot, and was as voracious a vinyl buyer as myself, and we were living together quite a lot of time in various places. So his decks would be there, my decks would be in another place or whatever, and he'd be buying a lot of jungle and I'd be buying a lot of techno, and that's the kind of way that the pattern settled, in terms of becoming, practicing as a DJ. You kind of, being around somebody who's really into it as well really helped a lot. in terms of getting confidence as a DJ. And, you know, eventually I started to find my feet with what labels I wanted. And it was just more of a matter of me finding more people that were into this, you know. But similar to you going to America, in about 95, I think it was, 95, I ended up going to Australia. I mean, prior to going to Australia, I'd actually been out to Europe to a technival in south of France. I think it might have been 94, and which was a recommendation from a friend of Will's that he'd met at university, a girl called Claire, who was in touch with, she knew Simon Underground, and she at the time knew, still does know, Christoph from Praxis, and had a lot of records. And she'd been at university with Will, and she had a load of tunes, and that opened my eyes to quite a lot of labels which I just didn't know existed. So you know, I started to really sort of find my feet in what I was buying and finding some interesting new music and avenues to go down. But I decided, you know, for whatever reasons, that I had to go to Australia, do some traveling while I could. So I went over there with a partner and got involved in doing some parties over there. What was funny was when I went over, I thought I'll take some records and I'll get a job in a record shop when I get over there. So I get over to Sydney, and first record shop I walk into is Zoom Records on Oxford Street in Sydney. I'm like, that's got the same logo as Zoom in Camden. Right, okay. Right, I've been buying quite a lot of records at Zoom in Camden.
Okay. Was it the same? Yeah.
Yeah, and guess who was behind the counter? The Scottish bloke who used to work at Zoom Records in Camden.
Oh,
and
wow.
I'm there wearing a Outcast Clan UK Underground Techno Resistance t-shirt, and he's just looking at me going, all right, mate, don't we know each other? I was like, oh, yeah, kind of small world, isn't it? And I'm like, you've got a job? And he's like, no, I've got it. You know, but so, you know, he was over there, and, you know, at the time in Australia, what underground scenes they had was veering very much in the sort of acidy techno sort of area in terms of what was kind of popular and what was being sold out there, because Australia was a big part of the sort of traveling thing in the 90s, and there were links between that and the dreaded Goa, which had become a thing, and trance by now had become a sort of a thing. So trance was something to avoid, like happy hardcore, you know.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you ever met my mate Phil, who's from Sydney, like, you know, like, yeah.
I did, yeah. I met him while I was that's a funny story, because that's why I was bringing this up. I played. I met some people when I was out in Australia, in Sydney, who essentially got together a sound system, and there were a couple of people from Europe who were out there who decided that, you know, Sydney needed a sound system, and they got together a bunch of people and called themselves Vibe Tribe, and went and started putting on some what became huge parties in Sydney. And this was, I think, their sort of first big event, and they got this venue called the Graffiti Hall of Fame in Botany Bay, which was a huge sort of a courtyard area, open air courtyard with massive graffiti going, huge, great pieces going up about 30 feet around these walls. And they got in this gigantic turbo sound rig, and they booked me to play off the back of a few gigs I'd done at this local club, which was called Clan Analog, which was actually an industrial club, right, which had started veering into playing techno. So when I got in there, they were playing Throbbing Gristle. And by the time I left, I'd been playing, and they'd moved the tables out of the way. The place was rammed. They were going, what's this tune? What's that tune? What's this tune? What's that tune? My mate's got a radio station you could play on. You've got to come and play at this party. And I'm like, okay, I've met the right people then, you know? So I'm playing at this massive rave in Sydney, by far the biggest party I've ever played at. We've done our club in Hemel, and I've done a few gigs. I played at Club Dog by this time, supporting my mate's band and various bits, various kind of nerve-wracking sort of gigs. But this was like, you know, several hundred, if not 1,000 odd people.
Yeah.
Out of it in Australia. And the guy before me is a guy wearing, no joke, what looked like a holographic suit, playing Goa trance off 2 DAT machines. And I'm like, okay. And I'm looking at my record bag, and it's a mixture of industrial strength, Praxis, like, you know, proper hard nastiness, you know. About the nicest stuff I've got is like Extron records by Luke Slater, you know, which, if anyone knows, like, are some of the best hard, you know, banging techno ever made. Is the first few Extron.
Yeah, no, I dug Volume 1 out the other day, actually. I found it. I hadn't played that for years.
Absolutely unbelievable stuff. Extron 1 is just incredible.
He was the first DJ I heard playing my record, actually. But anyway, that's another story. But yeah, going back to Sydney.
So, you know, I'm playing this set, and this fella comes up to me and he's like, "You're from England?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm in a band. We've had a record out on Stay Up Forever called Waxhead Perverts."
Yeah.
Like, oh right. Funnily enough, yeah, I've heard that track.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, it's the one with Didgeridoo on it or something." I'm like, "Okay." It's like Small World. So yeah, I met your compatriot in Waxhead Perverts at a rave in Sydney in 1994.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, like he did. Yeah, he did this. Yeah, he did a record, one of the early Stay Up Forever, and actually, I did a remix on the B side. Say that again?
I said, aren't you mentioned on it or credited on it?
Well, I do a remix on the other side.
Exactly, there's a remix.
There's a Controlled Weirdness, like really sped up, mental, fast sort of remix on the other side. Yeah, I mean, we basically, I mean, he was from the mad old punk industrial scene in Sydney, dating back to like late 70s, early 80s, with like Severed Heads and all them sort of people.
Oh, right. I didn't realize he was. I can't remember from the time. I didn't realize he was Australian. For some reason, I thought he was an English bloke who'd come up to me.
No.
But anyway, yeah. So coming back, you know, I didn't last that long in Australia because I was just like totally starved of what I really liked, you know. So, you know, and also while I was out there, there was my friend Will had sent me a tape, and there was, I don't know if you remember, there was a tape company called the Techno Connection.
No, I don't remember.
Based in Leeds, and they used to do mail outs of radio shows from, you know, from London, from Detroit, from Germany, like in studio sets as well. Yeah. And they'd have all of the sets recorded from like Planet FM. Yeah. Oh. And Chillin' FM. And they'd sell these tapes and give money to the artists. And Will had sent me a tape by a DJ called Slim Jim.
Right.
And I'd never heard anything like it because I'd heard Gabba and I knew what Gabba was, yeah. But this was like some of the most like extreme like insanity out there. He was taking some records and playing them at the wrong speed, obviously, for it. But it was totally mental.
He might have been playing them at the right speed, Ian.
No, I shouldn't say it, but he actually played PCP 2 at the wrong speed, which 10 years later he would have poured a beer over his head for doing. But either way, it was like a real sort of reminder of what was going on back home. And simultaneously, I got sent a little techno sort of fanzine thing. I can't remember what it was, but I had a Drexciya interview in it.
Oh, wow.
And it was around about the time of when they released their release on Warp. And it was part of the promo for that. And in it, Drexciya, Stinson properly went on a rant about how DJs shouldn't be lazy and they should like really get like into the mix and stuff, you know? It was quite an inspiring sort of thing. So I was just really itching to get back on the decks. And so, you know, came back to the UK. And once I got back, I was just like pretty much resolved to get out of Hemel as soon as possible, and get somewhere where things were much more interesting. And
yeah, because like something to say like is because that time as well, like you said about the crowd in Australia, they didn't really know what tunes you were playing, and like you wanted to get back and hear the tunes. Like obviously, like now you can hear everything worldwide, and you pretty much know what's going on worldwide. But there was definitely, I had a similar thing when I toured around Germany in certain places in the mid 90s that basically, you know, they wouldn't have heard some of the tunes. And like you said, like it was hard getting access to this sort of stuff. And like the radio and, you know, it was quite interesting that service you said about sending the tapes because, yeah, unless you were in London, you hear some of the pirates, you wouldn't really know a lot of these tunes. When I took all the hardcore records over to Pittsburgh, they wouldn't have heard, they probably wouldn't have heard these because like there wouldn't have been no radio stations in Pittsburgh playing these tunes.
This was going on. I mean, skipping way ahead of time. This was still going on in the 2000s. I'd be going out in the 2000s to places like in Eastern Europe, and they'd be like, "What is this music?" I'm like, this is dubstep." I'm like, "Oh, okay." 10 years later, they've got millions of labels. But yeah, I mean, so it was also just really missing. I mean, it's ironic. I mean, Australia, it's beautiful paradise, and I'm just really missing dirty warehouses.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to be said. Like somewhere. Well, I guess because I'm London based, I'm saying London. But just the fact of like when it's shit winter and like it's cold and rainy and like you're not going to be it's not like cafe culture, so you're not like sitting by the beach. If you like, it'd be a lot easier if you're in California or somewhere like that. You're just out in the sunshine and living your best life. And so it's almost in London, like I said, during the deep winter when it's cold and miserable, you have to go and make your own fun. So like, why not put on a mad party and dance all night? The pubs used to shut at bloody 10:30 or 11. So like, again, it's that thing of like, it forces people to actually do stuff and like get out there and do it. And I know a lot of the producers, used to say that, like I know Goldie used to say this, and like just like in the winter was the time just to get in the studio and make tunes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, out of the restrictions, I think it makes people, want to do mad shit.
No, certainly. You've got to keep warm somehow.
Yeah. One more record store I didn't mention actually was like, again, it's probably early 90s when I was living over West London for a bit, like 1990, 89 sort of time. Was Vinyl Solution down at Portobello Road. That they put out I was on their list for a while because I was playing out, so I got sent stuff like Depth Charge, Bounty Killers, and Spice.
All the Eon stuff.
Yeah, Spice, exactly, all them sort of tunes. But yeah, in the basement, it was like Phil Asher. I used to buy records of Phil Asher, and I bought loads of killer like UK hip hop that actually goes for a bit of money now, and I bought loads of great underground resistant records of Phil Asher, and yes, just some of the early rave records there. And funny enough, with do you know Phil? Did you know Phil or Phil Asher?
I know the name Phil Asher from credits on productions that are on Vinyl Solution.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if to be honest, I don't know.
I really do know the name.
I don't know if he produced on Vinyl Solution, to be honest, because like he was more like a housey sort of guy, Phil. But like he actually died a couple of years ago, actually.
Oh, so did he?
Yeah, but like it was about 5 years ago. I went up. I ended up in the Tape Exchange in Notting Hill, and like the one where it is now, you have to go up the stairs. And basically, I think I went on like something like Monday afternoon, just a classic. It's quite nice when you go in a record shop, and like you were saying earlier on, when there's no one there. But basically, I went in there, and it's just basically me. Like if Phil Asher was behind the counter, and I was up there just going for some tunes, and then he looks over to me, and I hadn't seen him for like over 20 years. And he went, "Oh, do I know you? I really recognize you." And I was like, "Yeah. I used to buy loads of records from you in 1989 or 90 or down Portobello." And then he was like, "Oh, yeah." And like, so we were just, chatting there for about 20 minutes, just like had a really good chat about, past times and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, he was a bit of a legend, Phil Asher. So yeah, I just want to mention him really because I said he passed away a couple of years ago, and there's a lot of people online bigging him up. He was a proper West London sort of record store guy. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in.
Yeah, West London's a bit of a sort of even though when you move from outside London, you don't grow up there. You kind of view all of London as a bit of a playground. You don't stay territorial. West London was like always like, well, what's there apart from the Exchange? I mean, in terms of like things that were going on. But yeah, it's I had to move back to London somehow.
Yeah,
and had to meet up with some people who are like-minded, doing what I was doing, and through another connection that Will had made at university, a girl called Gabby, who again was a big sort of pit of knowledge in terms of music and gabba and things like that. Hooked us up with a fella called Luke, who went on to be part of a sound system called Hecate, and me and Will and I moved up to London to live up there, and we lived and eventually, like, got involved with various sound systems up there. Hecate being sort of the first system that I was sort of playing on regularly, and it was really, really refreshing to meet a bunch of people who were as enthusiastic as me about music, and were as enthusiastic about not playing one style of music all night. Because the thing about sound systems at the time was there's, in the same way as musical genres organized themselves, systems would play what they played.
Yeah.
You have a techno rig, you have a jungle rig, you have an acid techno rig, and whatever. And yeah, there was a blurring of it. But Hecate seemed to be like, having a sort of more sort of diverse approach. And also there are a bunch of sort of young people starting off doing it. And so we kind of like formed a sort of nucleus of sort of people bringing each other up in terms of, like, their music that they're playing, but also sort of trying to distinguish themselves from each other in their styles. So it's a really sort of interesting time. Yeah, so record shops were becoming not as important in terms of sources of vinyl all of a sudden, because we started hooking up with people who are actually distributing and making a lot of the music which we might want to be playing. So an important person that I met around about this time was Christoph Fringhelli, who obviously, who runs a label called Praxis.
Yeah.
I've been buying records on Praxis pretty much since Praxis started, and there'd been another of these enigmatic labels. But Claire, who I mentioned earlier, had known Christoph for a while, and I'd actually been up to Dead by Dawn a few times before I'd moved up to London, so I was aware of them, but I'd only known him by name rather than actually meeting him. And Christoph and I got on pretty well, and started getting records off him, and which was really cool, because at the time Christoph's running Praxis, he would be getting in to distribute quite a lot of other labels that I was into at the time.
I actually met Christoph through Joel Deadly Buddha. That's how I actually got introduced.
Okay.
Because I think he come over and he was played there, and he basically, Joel was like, "Oh, you need to meet Christoph," and to Christoph, he's like, "You need to get Controlled Weirdness to play down at Dead by Dawn." And I went down there, and obviously, got on really well with Christoph, and played down there loads of times.
Well, that's when I first sort of became aware of you as an artist, because he was stocking Unearthly One and things like that.
Yeah.
So started hanging out a lot with Christoph, and I'd moved to South London at this point. I was living in Stockwell, with a whole load of us living in a big house, with pretty much constant throughput of people and records and characters who were coming through. So obviously, people were going over to Europe at this time, because the technical scene is fully functioning. So there's people coming over from Europe here with their styles and their records. And it's a really interesting time. So there's record shops at the time which we're going to, which are stocking interesting stuff which we didn't know people who were distributing, because around about this time, labels in Den Haag like Bunker, and Italian labels like Sounds Never Seen and quite a lot, and Nature and whatever, were being stocked in places like Eclectic in central London, and they'd be the places to go to get that stuff. The stuff that might have been not available to us.
Because Eclectic, that was in Covent Garden, wasn't it? I used to go down there.
Yeah, it was in Covent Garden. Yeah.
Was it Marco? Was it Marco the guy?
Yeah, Marco.
Yeah,
was the guy behind the counter. There was an upstairs bit which sold CDs.
Yeah, that's right.
The guy called AJ.
But I got loads of good tunes of Marco, and he won a few labels as well, I believe.
Yes, he did. Yeah, he was involved with some labels. And anything that you knew that came out on Bunker would come down there. And obviously, because he was Italian, he knew Leo Anaboldi and that guy, and of course, who we'd somehow made links with because he played on Hecate a few times. That was a connection through a guy called Sasha from Hard Sound Project, who sadly died, but he was quite a big influence musically at the time. In terms of mashing up of genres and stuff, as was Curly from Modern On. But around about this time, I also met the Audio Illusion crew. I met them at a Technival in Rotterdam, which is a whole other. You could do a movie about that Technival. And I was on the decks. I was playing a record by the Mover, and this character came out of the shadows. Was like, "Who are you? Why are you playing this record?" And it was said it was the Dexorcist. So he wasn't the Dexorcist then; he was Brown.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, I'm in. Who are you?" And we kind of got to know each other. And at the time, another sadly deceased person, Brett, was frantically running around the festival with his box of orange clear vinyl records, selling them by the enough to actually during the Technival go back to England, restock, and then come back to Holland. This is how long this Technival went on. And sold it. And this is of course, a Spite record by Cal. And Brett, and got to know Brett there, and Brett was similar ambitions to Christoph, to take over the world with his music, and said.
But it was a very autonomous scene, wasn't it? And
yes. I mean, the first Audio Illusion record I heard was in one of Phil Klein's alter egos, Final Dream. Some very, very, very industrial sort of electro, really excellent stuff. And I was meeting these people,
Yeah, I think the first time I met Phil, and I remember Phil, maybe Simon, I remember just Phil quizzing me about electro, and because I had an encyclopedic knowledge of early electro, I was literally immediately accepted,
I remember the first time I met Phil, I had no idea who he was. I was playing We Are the Borg battle tracks at a squat party, and he came up to me and goes, "Just put me." All right. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the electro Buddha, isn't he? Absolute stalwart. And so meeting those guys was kind of key in terms of them having their own sort of vinyl trading and distribution thing going, which Ben, who's part of the Bomb Dogs with Dexorcist, and him and Brett were running Audio Illusion, and they were living in South London at the time, and they'd be distributing different labels from what Christoph was distributing. So there was just a lot of throughput of vinyl, and when you've got myself and Simon Brown and whatever buying records regularly, there's still stuff that slips through your grasp, but if something comes out and it's really good, you're definitely wanting to hunt it down as quickly as you can. But there's also an element of I've got this and I don't want other people to have it. So but it was a good time, and I'd also at this time started selling records myself, mainly for Christoph. When he was away and whatever, I'd take box of records out to my flat and sell them out of my flat. Or if Ben and I used to do sort of a traveling sort of record shop thing, we'd go to various clubs around London, fill one record box with beer, fill the other record box with records, go in there, get smashed, and sell records down there. And did a few trips over to Europe doing sort of record fairs and stuff with Shuli from Den Haag at the time.
She was like the sort of Dutch link, wasn't she?
Massive respect to Shuli. Yeah, she knew the bunker guys from going way back, and obviously Curly.
I think she got Underground Resistance over there, didn't she? Or
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, she probably still is, and was a force when it came to promoting, pushing good music.
I mean, I do remember actually kind of connected with Christoph. It was that the guy Ferrant from IF, like
Oh, Ferenc, yeah.
yeah, he'd be selling all these records via fax. So that's why I got all the early Electronome and stuff like that, and
He's
all
got
these
some
limited.
catalogue as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. That again, this is whole other strand of mad, acid electro influence stuff that was totally different. But yeah, I remember I remember having like faxes where you could order direct from him. Of all these like early, just like weird Den Haag records.
Well, yeah, I mean, a label which had previously been just an enigma to me,
Yeah,
PCP,
yeah,
became something that was accessible because at this time, Crossbones, which was a sound system that I pretty strongly affiliated with, who are strictly sort of Gabba Doom sound system, who were militant in their music policy, but also militant in making sure that every weekend they did a party.
yeah.
I was playing with them for years, and they had some very strong connections with Frankfurt, and would go over to Frankfurt, meet up with Torsten and Mover and that, and come back with a box of records from Planet Core Productions directly, and which was amazing for me because, like as I said, they were quite a purposefully enigmatic label where you've got one producer who's working under about 50 different aliases,
yeah,
which Mark Trauner, the Mover,
yeah,
who, for a long time it would be like, well, my record collection was pretty much, a lot of it was like the Mover and Underground Resistance, and just fill in the gaps, with other stuff. And so a lot of things which had previously been out of reach became revealed. In a way, the mystery wasn't really lost at all. It was just more of a passion now for having access to music that I wanted to play, being able to get it slightly cheaper than I would if I was having to buy it over the counter. Yeah. And starting to, drift into ideas of like producing my own stuff.
No, for sure. I mean, I was connecting up with a bit with via Christoph with the Spiral Tribe. They distributed some of my early stuff, like Mark Spiral. They took a lot of, I think it was Unearthly Free, all around Europe. They got rid of loads around Europe, and at festivals and stuff like that. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, selling records out in Europe was an amazing experience because you'd set up your stall and they'd be literally flying out. People would be like, right, excellent, we've got access to this, and you'd sell huge piles of records to people really, really quickly, really enthusiastically. And it was great because you'd be trading records with the labels that were springing up out there. And it just get you around Europe, and you come back with the fruits of your label, which was like a box of tracks that wouldn't necessarily have made it into the country.
No, exactly. No, it definitely had the DIY spirit of like maybe what the punk new wave scene from the late 70s. I definitely saw that as a big part of the sort of scene of like, this underground movement of people sharing music and doing it yourself. Doing it yourself. Why wait for someone else to release it? Do it your fucking self.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously throughout this time, I've had a constant sort of love for drum and bass and jungle as well.
Yeah.
And I'm buying this in dribs and drabs throughout. Yeah. So drum and bass was the main, if I was doing record shopping, we're moving on to sort of later 90s now.
Yeah.
If I'm doing record shopping, then I'm out buying drum and bass. So in the drum and bass situation, it was a little bit like, but not a lot less because I'm older now and I'm far wiser and I know people in black market, etc., etc. In terms of access to tracks, I'm not getting dub plates off anyone, So we even drifted into like doing a bit of like drum and bass distribution at one point. We had an account with SRD and we're getting stuff off that, and so that was where the bulk of my record buying was in what drum and bass I was playing, because I'd like to be able to go to a warehouse party, be able to play a sort of doom set on Crossbones, a sort of mash up electro breakbeat set on on KDU or Mainline or whatever, and then go and play a drum and bass set on Ruckus or something, and then be able to go and play a drum and bass set on the radio or something,
Yeah.
Because from a purely from a DJing point of view, in terms of not having to be like mangling the pitch shifter all over the pitch control all over the place, drum and bass is just a really like nice groove to get into, and I still believe it's like one of the most sort of like technically in terms of sound design like forward looking scenes. It breaks a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of my vinyl buying was going. And so, yeah, I'm getting interested in production and starting to think, well, maybe I can make some tracks. I mean, I'd been in the studio a little bit with Ben and Simon, mainly as an observer, and I've been in the studio with Crossbones, and actually the first kind of record I ever did input on a piece of vinyl was a Crossbones record on the label they started, because they'd moved into being actually what became quite a large distributor. So yeah, I'd had this flat in South London by now, and for a while Ben from Audio Illusion set up his studio in my flat, and
was this down in New Cross? Was it when you were in New Cross?
Yeah, down in New Cross.
Yeah,
and at this time I'm running a little record shop as part of what is still going, a very talented costume maker called Mel, who's known as Prankster, who's used to be part of Spiral Tribe. She's always had like a vintage clothing shop, but also now she does like fancy dress stuff there. But anyway, big up Mel, basically. She let us set up a record shop in her shop, which was right bang on New Cross Road. And so I had a record shop going there for a while, selling everything, not really selling that much, and it just becoming a hangout spot.
Yeah,
but, it's cool having that record shop. But we had New Cross was a thriving sort of area at the time. We had
funny enough, my mates run Planet Wax there now, and like obviously I know you're not up here now, but like that's kind of is the hangout place, and there still is a thriving scene that they're taking care of around there. It's still going, it's still a mad area for music.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great place and a great time. So in terms of like musical contacts and stuff. And so I started doing some tracks with Ben, and a few of them came out all right. And a fella who we got in contact with, a French guy called Yvon, who ran a label, or just started a label called SMB, asked me and Ben if we was up for releasing the tracks. And I'm like, well, yeah, okay, of course. And similarly, around about this time, Dan Hecate, who'd been running a few labels for a while, generally distributed through Christoph, started a sub-label called Coven H. And another guy who was living upstairs from me, Ren, who's from a Dead Silence syndicate, we'd been working on some tracks on his computer. And that got released as well. So I don't know what came out first, but SMB 2 or this Coven H1 came out. But I remember for Coven H1, we were like, right, okay, we need to cut a dub plate of this. This was before we'd actually, got the record cut, and this is late 90s, maybe year 2000.
Yeah,
and we noticed that there was in Forest Hill, a place had literally just opened, selling for a dub plate cutting service. So the first vinyl I cut was a dub plate, and it was amazing, because I actually went in and saw the cut and stuff. I'd attended a few cuts with Christoph before, which was another kind of peeling back of the layer, because he used to master with a guy called Martin. I'm sure you've met. And
he mastered loads of my tunes actually. Yeah,
I think he mastered the Beatles, didn't he?
Yeah, but obviously he reached the pinnacle of his career when he did mine and your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. You go to see Martin, and it'd be an incredibly plush, very, 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 luxurious studio.
Yeah.
And then you go to other places to cut records, like Porky's. It was brilliant. It was just like going to a rave. for about an hour.
Yeah, well, I can't records at JTS, and that's a whole other story.
Yeah. So I mean, it was really a really interesting time because I'm learning the whole mechanism of this thing because I've been very much sort of I'm a DJ, I'm a DJ, I'm a DJ. I don't really need to produce or do anything like that, but I just sort of fell into that.
So it's like the transition, yeah. So
yeah,
the music making started.
Pretty much, yeah. I had to think of a name for all this stuff, and
God, what are you going to come up with?
Exactly. So for some reason, Blackmass Plastics popped into my mind, and I've since discovered that I think its influence is pretty much a riff on a skit that Lee Scratch Perry does at the start of an On You Sound album he does, where he mentions Black Magic Plastic, and it's one of my favourite Lee Perry tunes. And I've got an idea that the first time I wrote the name down was when I was broken down in a lay-by for 3 days in the south of France.
Right.
Just sketching on a pad as you do, you know, tagging stuff. And I might have been listening to that album or something. I've got no idea. But I wrote that down on this book, which ended up knocking around the place. Yeah. And I thought, that'd be a good name for a record label. And initially was meant to be a name for a label. Yeah. But I didn't have that much of an imagination at the time. It was the first name that popped into my head when Yvonne said, do you want to do another record? And I was like, yeah, okay, Blackmass Plastics.
Many thanks to Ian, Mr. Blackmass Plastics, for taking the time to share some stories from the underground rave and party scene. Join us next time for some more Tales from a Disappearing City.